Hi guys, Mr. Dell here. We are looking at, this is CPM CC2, and this is section 3.3.3, and specifically number 3-28. So it wants us to find the product of each of these expressions, right? So you have, and then also express your answer in both fraction and decimal. So what we've got here for A, I'm going to rewrite so that way we can see it clearly. We have, sorry about that. Let's try that again. Okay, we have for A, we have 1 and 25 hundredths times -3/5, right? So what I'm looking at in this case, multiplying a number, which the number I'm multiplying here is a decimal value, a number with a decimal, and I'm multiplying that times a fraction value. It's probably best to either convert the fraction to a decimal or the decimal to a fraction, right? Either way. And if we want our answer in decimal and or fraction, either one, you're going to need that to do one or the other as we're doing the multiplication. So I'm going to look at this as actually, I see 25 hundredths, and I think of that as 1/4, right? So I can quickly convert that to be 1 and 1/4 times -3/5. So I'm going to put the decimal in terms of a fraction and then multiply. So in order to multiply fractions, remember, what do we need? We need to actually multiply. We first need to take a mixed number and put it into a single fraction. So this is 5/4 times -3/5. Now I have two single fractions, and when I multiply fractions, I just multiply straight across. So 5 times 3 is 15. 4 times 5 is 20. And it's a positive times a negative, so my final answer is going to be negative. And then I look at that and say, oh, I can actually simplify that fraction. 5 divides into the top and bottom. So we now have an answer as a fraction would be -3/4. So that's the fraction answer in terms of a fraction. But in terms of a decimal, we hopefully know that 3/4 is 75 hundredths, right? 3/4 of a dollar, 3/4 is 75 cents or 75 hundredths. So hopefully you've got that memorized, or you know that conversion there. So there's our fraction and decimal equivalent for A. Okay. Just for the sake of making sure we understand the other direction, it's taking, could I take this number and done it as decimals, right? So I have 1 and 25 hundredths times 3/5. Well, I could take that 3/5 and turn that one into a decimal, right? In order to convert a fraction to decimal, remember, you take the denominator and divide it by the numerator, right? So we look and I'm sorry. I just realized I did that wrong. Let me say that one more time. Take the numerator and divide it by the denominator. All right. So that's the proper way of dividing a fraction. The denominator goes into the numerator how many times, right? Because this is 3 divided by 5. So I'm going to add a decimal place here and put in the decimal, and then I look at 3 goes into that 30, right, 6 times. So that's where that 6 tenths would come into play. So I could take and multiply 1 and 25 hundredths times 6 tenths. And to multiply decimals, remember the way we multiply decimals is we will just multiply the numbers without the decimal place. So just multiply. So I'm bringing this over here to show the multiplication of a decimal, right? So we multiply just using the algorithm minus the decimals, ignore the decimals at point without right, the digits without the decimal places. So we get 0, carry the 3, 5, carry the 1, 7. So I end up with 750. And then I look to see how many digits are there in the decimal place. There's 1, 2, 3 digits. So I take my answer here and I take where the decimal would be at the end, and I move it over 3. And that's where the decimal now should lie when you multiply those decimals, and you end up with 0.75, which is what I had here, right? And again, I'm going to remember that's a -6 tenths when I converted that fraction to a decimal. So this would be a negative 75 hundredths. And then again, make it as a fraction would be 3/4. So that's A, to show you the both processes is converting to fraction and then multiplying, or converting them both to decimal and then multiplying. Okay, so that's A. Let's look at B, and I'll be a little quicker here. B, the question is asking you to take negative 3 2/7, and I'm going to multiply that by 14 hundredths. So I have negative 3 2/7, and I'm multiplying by 14 hundredths. Okay, so how do we do that multiplication? I got to look at whether I want to convert this to a fraction or that to a decimal. I'm going to take the decimal here and convert that to a fraction, right? We know that if this is 14 hundredths, I'm going to write it as 14 hundredths, right? As a decimal, it's 14 hundredths. As a fraction, it's 14 over 100. So I have this negative 3 2/7 times 14 hundredths, right? So I can go ahead and put this as a single fraction. 7 times 3 is 21, plus 2 is 23. So my new numerator is 23 over 7. And then times, and I actually can simplify this fraction to be 7/50ths. That might make the multiplication a little nicer. 7/50ths, right? Because 14 is divisible by 2, and so is 100. So when you multiply straight across, you end up, in fact, as well, let me show you this. Before you multiply, I see that I have a 7 in this denominator and a 7 in this numerator, right? We can actually simplify before we multiply, because there's going to be a factor of 7 top and bottom, right? So I can factor out or divide out a 7 top and bottom before I even multiply. So really now I've got 23 times 1 is 23, and 1 times 50 is 50. So there's my fraction, 23 over 50. So what is this as a decimal? As a decimal, you could go the process of taking 23 and divide it by 50 and do the long division algorithm. Or remember, when you're converting into decimal, if you could put the fraction over 100, you would see the decimal, right? Because it's over the hundredths. And we can see 50 to become 100 is just multiply top and bottom by 2. So this becomes 46 over 100. So as a fraction, I have 23/50ths. And as a decimal, I have 46 hundredths. As a decimal, 46 hundredths. I need to go back, though. I need to remember somewhere along the way, and it's always good to go back and look. I have a negative times a positive, and right here I drop my negative. There would be a negative times a positive, so my final answer actually should be negative 23 over 50, or negative 46 hundredths. Okay, there's B. All right, last one. Let's look at C. C is saying to do, let's see, let me pull it back up. C is negative 4 37 hundredths, and that's being multiplied by negative 5 2/10. Okay, so let me write it bigger here and do the math. So we have negative 4 37 hundredths times negative 5 2/10. In this case, they're already in decimal form, so I'm going to multiply it in decimal form, which, remember, the algorithm is we take and rewrite the digits without decimal places and use the multiplication algorithm to do the multiplication, right? So I'm rewriting them without decimals and just multiplying to see what I have without the decimals. So let's see, let me do the multiplication real quick here. Okay, so then let's see, we have okay, so I've got well, what this looks like as is 22,624. But remember, we multiplied these numbers, these digits, without Wait. I think I did my math wrong here. Uh-oh, hang on. Let me double check. Oh, 2 times 7. Oh, I put a 2 instead of a 3. So this should be an 8. I just caught that. That's going to change things. See, we make mistakes, but we got to be able to check and just look again. So I made a mistake here. So that should be a 7. All right. So what we've got here is what looks like 22,724, but I need to go back and count how many places were there, how many digits behind the decimal place. There's 3 digits behind the decimal. So I take the decimal at the end when I'm doing this algorithm. Now I move it 3 times. So really my answer here would be actually 22.724. 22.724 or 22 and 724 thousandths, right? And I look again at my signs. It was a negative times a negative, so it is a positive. So this is the decimal equivalent. What would be the fraction equivalent? Well, the fraction, remember, is just as a mixed number, this is 22, and what? This is 724 thousandths, so 724 thousandths, all right? So as long as you understand, to me, that I'd be good with. If you wanted to go ahead and take and simplify, divide out by 2, divide out by 4, or whatever the case is, in order to simplify this, you could. But I'd be good with that answer there to show me you understand the relationship between that decimal and that fraction. All right, there you go.